Hi, this is Rob Simone, and I want to tell you about my brand new show here on the Paranormal Radio Network. Each week, I bring you the most interesting people on the planet, the most in-depth and the most controversial issues. We go where no talk show dares to go. Join me every week for the Rob Simone Talk Show here on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
Hello, everyone. Trish Sheridan, host of A Global Focus. Come join us each Friday evening at A Global Focus's new time, 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Come join the discussion.
Breaking news. Strange black pyramid UFO ships over every major city on the Earth. People are exhilarated and scared. Reptilian strange creatures are beaming down. My God, they're beaming me up with them. Don't put that probe there. Don't put that probe there. Don't put ooh. Listen to the Church of Mabus radio show at 11 p.m. Eastern, Saturday nights with host Jeffery Pritchett, bringing you the high strange. Visit www.churchofmabusradio.com. That's www.churchofmabusradio.com.
Hi there. Got your attention? I'm Gia Scott, and I was curious what you were doing from 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time on Tuesdays. See, I host this really interesting little radio program that airs live then, and we bring in all sorts of guests. Authors, experiencers, and everything in between. It's paranormal and guaranteed to make you go, My guest list is always up at www.giascott.com, and do tune in to the Dawn of Shades from 7 to 9 p.m. on Tuesdays.
Hello, I'm Chip.
I'm Nicole.
Together we host the Mind Cemetery, where the paranoia about the paranormal comes to rest.
We broadcast live every Monday night at 11 p.m. Eastern for 2 full hours. You can find us on Twitter and Facebook, as well as our website, mindcemetery.com.
We cover all the topics you won't hear on your local news.
Well, I don't really like watching the news anyway.
Then this is the perfect show for someone like you.
I wouldn't go that far. After all, I am the skeptic.
So you don't believe in ghosts?
Nope.
UFOs?
Yeah, no.
How about Bigfoot?
Not really. You'll never find a Bigfoot.
How about the lost city of Atlantis, then?
Isn't that on Google Earth? No? Then forget it. It's never going to get found.
Looks like I have my work cut out for me then, as I take on a true skeptic as we discuss the latest and hottest topics in the UFO and paranormal fields with some of the most provocative and informative guests to hit the airwaves.
That's right, you do. And it all happens right here on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, live every Monday night at 11 p.m. Eastern. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook, as well as mindcemetery.com.
Hi everyone, I'm psychic medium Christopher George, and I have a new show that will air the first Friday of every month from 11 to midnight Eastern Standard Time. The show is called Insight with psychic medium Christopher George. It's all about psychic readings. I welcome my listeners to call in for a free reading. Just remember, don't ask me a question that you really don't want the answer to. I'll give it to you the way the spirits give it to me. Straightforward and real. The first Friday of every month. Insight, 11 to midnight.
Tune in to UFO Undercover, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern, with your host, Joe Montaldo, right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Benetti, and along with Joe Montaldo, we co-host a new show called News on the Flip Side. You can catch us every Saturday night, 8 p.m. Central, where we will be discussing current events and topics going on in the world today. We have opinions on everything. There's no topic that we won't discuss, and we'll go places that other shows wouldn't dare. False history gets made all day, every day. The truth of the new is never on the news, but you can hear News on the Flip Side, only on the UFO Paranormal Radio Network.
Light up your night with The Kevin Smith Show. Hi, this is Kevin Smith. Join me Monday through Friday right here on the Paranormal Radio Network.
Paranormal Radio. Paranormal Radio. The Church of Mabus.
Down and hiding from the spotlight, and through the long, elongated red line. In the hours of people, apparently and historic, opposed to secret society.
Shut down our government's defense system. And we are continuing on that the only safe airport is withholding information from the general public on this subject. The Church of Mabus.
Welcome to the Church of Mabus, everybody. It's Saturday night again, and we have returned. And just a little perspective on the guest and who will be hosting with me tonight. The guest, Eve Lorgan. She has a new book out, The Dark Side of Cupid, Love Affairs, Supernatural, and Energy Vampirism. And we'll also be discussing the alien love bite, and we have Jason Wilson with us. And it's going to be a great interview. And before we start, which will be very soon, I just want to mention next Saturday's guest is the Bigfoot Chicks. Chicks that hunt Bigfoot. Seriously. And I believe Andy Colvin, Mothman photographer, is going to be co-hosting with me. I have to check in with him and make sure everything's still on schedule. But we're going to be interviewing a whole team of women, plus they have one male member. I guess he's like the Charlie of the, like Charlie's Angels of the bunch, and they're the Bigfoot Chicks. So that's next Saturday. Should be pretty interesting. So let's get to our guest and get the show rolling. Jason, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. It's good to be back on the show, Jeff. Actually, I think this is the first time I've been on this show, but I've been on this time slot before in the past, and hey, I kind of miss it. And I don't know, Jeff, when you invited me to guest host the show and said that Evie Lorgan was one of the potential people I could speak to, I had to jump all right on that one, because I followed Evie's work for some point in time. A lot of the contactees that I've talked to are actually big fans of her work, and I believe we've got several of them that were interested in the show and are listening to us right now, so it should be an interesting show with an interesting guest. About me, I've been a alien abduction researcher for at least the past dozen years or so. Let's call it about 14 years. I was recently promoted to the North American Director for the International Community for Alien Research, and basically my job, as I alluded to earlier, is I talk to contactees, and, like I said, a lot of them have a lot of questions about the love bite theory. They've been bitten themselves. I mean, I know I have, and hey, who better to have than the expert on the topic right here with us.
Definitely, and we both me and Jason both have discussed the alien love bite situation, have agreed that we've been in situations like that at some level. So I guess, first off, Eve, If you could, tell us about the Alien Love Bite. That was your first book, and that's kind of the origins and the roots of what motivated you and inspired you to do The Dark Side of Cupid. If you could you give us a little background on exactly what the Alien Love Bite is?
Okay, well, I'll just give you a recap. I became interested in the alien abduction phenomena, actually, after Bud Hopkins' books came out way back in the early 80s, I believe. And I've had experiences myself, so I realized part of that was going on with my own self and family. But I became more interested in the aspect of what I felt was alien manipulation of the abductees' lives and their relationships when, in the 1990s, after I started doing a support group for abductees, several people in the group were having these love obsession issues, which seemed kind of synchronous, that several of us in the group were all having similar kinds of experiences related to love obsessions, where they felt that these abductees felt that their alien handlers were putting them together with certain selected, who were not necessarily their current spouses, but there was an infatuation or love obsession that happened as a result, and it carried a certain pattern to it that was actually explained to me in more detail by Barbara Bartholick, who at the time was my mentor, and this went on for many years until I wrote the book in 2000, The Love Bite. So it's actually, the Alien Love Bite was a term that somebody, an abductee, made up when aliens were putting people together and they would have these anomalous, powerful love connections with another person. So that was actually the descriptor for an alien-orchestrated bonding drama of some sort. But the book is actually called The Love Bite because I didn't want to use the alien term because it was actually somebody else's term, and I didn't want to use what they created. But anyway, I think more than aliens can do it now that I've studied this for a while, that it's not really just about aliens, although I think it's being understood and seen through the lens of people who have regular alien visitations. And I believe it's actually much more. So I guess that's what started that. And it was actually Barbara Bartholick who really enlightened me as to much more details in terms of what the aliens were really doing to people and other anomalous things that happened not only within, quote, the alien abduction or encounter experience, but also outside of it and surrounding different kinds of experiences that people have that they're not necessarily medical exams or things that you might hear on the documented cases, but things that involve their emotional lives and their love lives and their sex lives, and, of course, manipulation of relationships that it seemed to happen not only within their experience but surrounding their lives and outside the, quote, abduction experience. So, that's why I wrote the first book and actually had several case studies of people who believed themselves to have had relationships that were set up, staged, orchestrated, influenced, or even disrupted by who they believed to be aliens. And so I actually chose several in the first book that were basically recapped stories from already investigated cases, such as the Linda Corteil case with the Brooklyn Bridge incident that Bud Hopkins wrote about in the Witnessed book. Hers was actually a case, and that was pretty much well documented, where, and I'm just kind of re-going over what was stated in the Love Bite. The classic alien love bite is where two targeted partners, oftentimes, of course, they're both abductees, were taken at several times throughout their childhood and maybe teen years, even adult years, throughout their lives, taken by the aliens and put together in some kind of scenario, either on an alien craft or in other unspecified kinds of liaisons. And a lot of times they're only experienced as dreams, but if someone goes through regressive hypnosis, they may come to find out it happened during an actual, abduction. So this was what basically defined the bonding scenarios that took place, which created really strong psychic connections and soul connections between two individuals, so that when they met later in life, they would have a powerful deja vu, they would feel an instant soul connection, psychic connection, and it would set off a whole series of symptoms, which I described in the book, with the synchronicities and the omens and the precognitive dreams or mutually shared dreams, and increased alien visitations or paranormal activity during the drama of the session, which took place usually with one person or sometimes both. And so that's basically the history of the love bite and why I wrote it. And as a researcher, what I felt was the most important thing during support groups and talking to people over the years was really the fact that not that these things took place. I pretty much knew that abductions and encounters and unusual things were happening to people. I personally felt like I didn't need a lot of evidence to do that to, make the public believe it. What I felt was more important was the aspect of manipulation and influence and some sort of disruption or distraction that would take place in the lives of the abductees or the surrounding people in their lives, such as their family members or their co-workers or their friends, that appeared to be influenced by the same alien presence that was involved in that person's life. In other words, I felt like, well, that's much more important because this influence is happening not only to the abductee, but to other people surrounding them in their lives, and other people really are not aware, but the abductee is actually more aware because they've had to deal with it all their life. So that's what I felt was more important. So I really wanted to zero in on the relationship interference and then how to tell if that's really happening. How could we identify, the signs and the symptoms, and when we start feeling certain things and experiencing certain things to know, okay, this is not normal. There's some kind of influencing happening here that may or may not be aliens, or it could be, like in my new book, I call it the paranormal viral factor. There's something influencing it. We may not be absolutely sure what it is, although nearly 60% of the people in the second book admitted to have had at least one alien visitation in their life, and oftentimes more than that. So I believe that this extends beyond what I call the alien abductee experiencer population. It can actually happen to people who don't experience this phenomena regularly. So I think that's a big wake-up call, in my view, after I realized this. Of course, only someone like me would maybe see this more deeply, because others may not see what I see. Because I work closely with people about unusual experiencing in their private lives, which most people really want to keep it private. They don't want to go public about this. So most of the people that I have written about in the book wanted to use pseudonyms and not use their real names, for obvious reasons, because oftentimes they may be married to another partner, or sometimes it creates an illicit love obsession with another person other than the one they're with. So, it can create some issues there.
Oh, trust me, I know about that. I do much the same thing. I talk to a lot of people about a lot of experiences. They're not quite ready for public consumption. These are personal things that happen to people that, they would destroy their lives and their careers potentially if any of this came out. So, I definitely understand the constraints that you have to work with there.
And not only that, but in the military, what I call the MILAB experience, where the person also has alien, visitations throughout their life, but there may be a military component. And then there's some more complex issues, because we do see the disruption, distractions, harassment, and that kind of activity. So many people do not want to go public for that reason, because they've had to endure really unpleasant side effects, or what I call the reprisals, as a result of either going public or trying to investigate their own case, or trying to heal or become more aware, like say do hypnosis or therapy. Sometimes there's disruptive elements which appear to sabotage that process, which was something that I wrote about, in the book that I felt was really important. And I explained it as spiritual warfare, for lack of a better term, because sometimes it wasn't concrete, but it was definitely experienced in a paranormal way. So that told me that there's some force that doesn't want us to be aware, and I think it extended beyond the natural, what I call denial system of the individual. If someone goes through trauma, for example, and they're not ready to deal with it, there may be a natural repressive and resistant aspect to that person to dealing with the truth. And I know that that's part of a natural human process. When people aren't ready to deal with something, they will resist it. But this went beyond the natural resistance factor of human psychology. It went beyond that, where there was definite errance, with telephone disruptions, emails not being sent or received, being threatened, being fired from their job, et cetera, et cetera. So that tells me there's a force that does not want us to be aware of what's happening, or doesn't want us to come to awareness of our experiences. So that's really important to know that, because then it would make me want to explore even more, which I did.
That's exactly on the boat that I find most contact, or people that are, not even people that aren't even, I would call contactees yet, but people that, are wondering, it's like, okay, is it really true that with all these weird things going on in my life, some of the shadow memories that I have, it's like, is it possible that aliens are manipulating me at some point? I mean, that's basically how most people are. The information is definitely being hidden from them, but there's enough of a breadcrumb trail that they want to follow it anyway. But, I mean, as you alluded to, you can't really, go completely and totally public with your search, because most people realize they have a type of duality. I mean, it will destroy your life and your career if you go out with this.
Well,
so
not always, but it definitely will put pressure on people. Let's say, if you're married to a spouse who doesn't believe, and you're starting to come to an awareness of your own abductions throughout your life, and then let's say the spouse didn't know because at the time it wasn't an important thing, or your memories didn't come back until later in your adult life, which is often the case. And so sometimes that can disrupt a relationship or a marriage, just the awakening process. But I don't think denial is good. I think when someone's ready to awaken, they need to seek out whoever they can to help them remember and process whatever that is, so they can, deal with it better. Because otherwise, it can create a lot of post-traumatic stress and addictions and all kinds of anxiety, insomnia, and you name it.
Eve, I wanted to say that first off, I've had only situations where I've been in the alien love bite situation, so I definitely believe in the phenomenon. But what I'm trying to understand is, like you say, it's the dark side of Cupid. Are all these stories, do they end negatively, or is there a light side of Cupid as well? Because I'd like to think there are light beings that, that there's a positive ending to some of these relationships as well. But I know there's dark ones because I've been in them. But
yeah,
I won't tell you about the light side.
Yeah, on the light side, I did write about one in the book, the new book, The Dark Side of Cupid. Actually, a couple of cases, and most of the people the reason why they come to me is because something in their life is not working right, or they're having a problem with something. So I would be like a marriage counselor where I'm seeing the problems, right? But in at least one or two cases in the book, because the person was aware, they understood what was happening, and they dealt with the disruptions, they were able to nip it in the bud so that they maintained their connection and they maintained the relationship and stayed married for over 17 years. So there are people who are able to work it out if they are aware, and they're able to work with the triggering that happens when, let's say, one partner is unconscious of the manipulation. Their awareness is not expanded enough to deflect what the aliens or whoever these beings are doing to them. And that's the difficulty. That's why a lot of times they don't work, is because of the awareness factor, and one person is, or both, is not expanded enough to be able to see the causes and effects of what's happening. So that's why, and like at least a third of the new book, The Dark Side of Cupid, I go through healing strategies and communication strategies so that you basically could deal with this and maintain the love connection if it's good, so that you could nurture that. So I definitely believe good ones can happen, although in most of the cases it appears that there's what I call the paranormal viral factor, where there was what I call a third-party entity that was either setting the relationship up or interfering in it or disrupting it in some way that created what I felt was energy vampirism, was the ultimate reason for this happening in the second book. Although in the first book, The Love Bite, I made several postulations of why aliens were putting people together. And in some cases, they had children. like a bloodline study. In other cases, in the MILAB people, they may have been put together with a partner because they worked better with that partner in what I call control ops aspect of being a MILAB, which is probably something that's not really discussed much about in the the community, but it's something that happens and has been reported. So there's actually several reasons why, quote, the aliens or the military, whoever these beings are, put people together.
Well, being a reduction researcher, I've come across the MILAB thing, and I know I have a couple of experiences myself that I believe could definitely be MILABs related. But you're definitely right about that. I mean, this is one of the theories that I hold, is that I think MILABs isn't exactly in control, and I think MILABs doesn't exactly know the full picture of what's going on. But I believe that MILABs does know enough that they know that certain people are being gotten, and they have at least some rough idea of what they're doing. And quite honestly, I believe what MILABs is doing is they're trying to take some of the same people, we're willing to reverse engineer what's being done to these people, too, to see if they can achieve the same effects themselves. And, I'd have to agree with you. I mean, in, the emotional and relationship and lead-bite aspects, along with, a lot of the other aspects of it, it all seems to, point to the same thing, that, yes, aliens are involved with it, and I believe you're right that MILABs is attempting to dabble their fingers into the work, too. And actually, I'd probably have to say that, it's the MILABs experiences that are probably a little bit more detrimental to the well-being of these poor people than, the actual alien experiences. Not that I'm saying those are good by any means, but, when you've got a monkey trying to do the work of a scientist, he's going to screw something up.
Yeah, I feel like the MILABs people are actually more aware, and it seems like more happen because they're in a second project. They're not only, in the alien project for the aliens, but the military have adopted them or sheep-dipped them into an additional project, which maybe it's beneficial to both the aliens and the humans working together. So the MILABs definitely seem to have more experiences and experience more trauma. But, I've seen others, abductees are just plain traumatized, and it seems to me that there's just a lack of awareness. It's like a iceberg where what's on the surface of the consciousness is, the iceberg that's visible, but there's so much more underneath the veil of consciousness happens, Yeah,
and I think that also, too, that, the aliens have a better mechanism to be able to screen and remove memories. I just don't think MILABs can do it quite as well as the aliens can. So, those events would definitely be perceived as more traumatic, whether they were actually not.
Yeah, and I believe probably the military is using a lot of the alien technology that they've either back-engineered or were given to do some of the same things that the aliens are doing, I believe that they can, although the aliens seem to be better at it, in terms of more seamless, in terms of they don't have to institute such trauma to do it.
But just think that, once MILABs does this a little bit more and they get a better of a handle on it, start being able to do it just about as good as the aliens do, man, that is going to make our job a whole lot harder.
Yes, and I think nowadays the technology is more advanced, whereas in the early days, let's say people who are in their 60s, 70s, 50s, a lot of times their early abductions with aliens or military seem to be more concrete and physical, or when the military took them, they seem to remember more physical, concrete things, whereas nowadays, the younger generation, you don't even need that to take place. Either that or they tag you first physically, and then after they tag you, implant you, you're able to more easily access through the interdimensional technology where a portal opens up in your room and you go through it and you disappear and that's it, and they just enter into your home. It's not like a van has to come and pick you up and some helicopter take you or whatever. It doesn't look like that anymore unless it's low-level technology. I'm getting kind of off the topic of the book, even though several people in the book were MILABs in the second book. And they're the ones who actually had the more dramatic, what I call dark side of Cupid relationship, where actually in the second book, what I seem to have found over the years was that there were people coming to me where they thought, oh, do I have an alien love bite thing? I'm having this strange relationship with this partner. And some of the times the people weren't even abductees. They were just regular people, or let's say light workers who were really positive people and healers, where they were targeted by a love partner who was a psychopathic type that was hosted or overshadowed by a non-human entity, like the reptilian type of entity. And these kinds of people were absolutely shocked that such a thing could even happen. And these people were not classic alien abductees or MILABs. So there's something new happening. There appears to be a type of human that is overshadowed by a third-party entity that people and basically uses them as they're energy vampires, in other words. So I was seeing that a lot more, because that's what some people came to me, because it was really shocking and hurtful and emotional and just draining. So I talk a lot about the dynamics of energy vampirism, how to recognize that in your relationships if it's happening. And I believe the aliens are also doing this based on my observations over the years. But I don't think it's just, alien greys or reptilians or whatever. There's other types of entities that are either interdimensional, transdimensional, or incorporeal who can affect the same thing within a relationship and create like an energy vampirism issue, except they're indirectly affecting it as a third-party entity situation. So that's something that I want to point out. That was different, like, from the alien love bite.
Yeah, actually, Eve, when I first, you were the first person that had come up with the concept that I had read about it in that form anyway, about the whole energy vampirism thing. Oh. And, I'd have to admit that when I first read that, I used to be a little bit more reactionary than I am now, and, I used to kind of have this thing where I would, in my opinion, that a lot of the New Agey type people were more like dogmas and beliefs and trying to throw it into anything, and I sort of lumped, energy vampirism into that. Because I hadn't had much experience with that topic. When I first read about it, I thought, this is a little bit out there. I'm not sure if he's right about it or not. But, honestly, since then, I've kind of had my own experiences, and I've talked to a lot of other contactees that all seem to come out of the woodworks at once that, were experiencing precisely what you were talking about. And I have to admit, yeah, you and the evidence eventually won me over with that one.
Yeah, it's complex. I mean, there's a case in the book where the gal, her first, the dark side of Cupid, it was actually an alien love bite in this particular case, and what they remembered was bonding as children, where they were both able to mutually witness the dream, and it was remembered as a dream, although I think the aliens have ways of doing this in our energy bodies. They may not even have to take us physically for things like this to create that connection. But she experienced the emotional highs and the crashing lows, that kind of scenario. And I'm trying to remember what the point I was going to make, but she's also, this woman's in a new relationship where it's another, she feels it's orchestrated and interfered with, but the next relationship she's in, she's making it work because her and her partner are aware. So that's a step in the positive direction, because I think if people are aware, they can work it out, but they have to understand what's happening. So.
I've recently gone through a situation somewhat like that. Actually, you mentioned two situations earlier where love bite was more of a one-way thing, and another one where, like you just talked about, it had, people sort of recognized themselves falling into the trap that had danced this dance before and, sort of nipped it in the bud and kept it, from, blowing up or anything like that. Just being cautious and even wondering if, we're being manipulated or would even work out. In the first case, where it was the one-way thing, I mean, that one was just strange. I had some kind of weird dream where it was almost like I was offered this particular person, but even in the dream, I had reservations about it. It was, pretty much indefinite, like, I don't know about this one. Then I ended up meeting her. Thank God I never really met her in real life, but I mean, it just became an untenable situation. I mean, she had these ideas that she and I were meant to be together to right some wrong that had been done during the Egyptian god era thousands of years ago. And, I mean, I was able to help this person, but there was no way I was going to be able to do it. I mean, she wanted everything, but, you know, she just simply wasn't the one. And, you know, I eventually had to push her away, and, well, I still kind of feel like I had to be a dick for doing that, you know, but it had to be done.
Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't work. And that was the point I was going to make. The couple in the book, Anna and Caleb, in the second book, they did have a past life connection that they, now I know what it was, and I'm sorry to be disruptive here, but the aspect of karmic connections has come up with many individuals where the aliens, or somehow they're shown in visions or dreams, that they had some kind of past life connection together, and that's one of the strong bonding aspects. And it's something that wrote it out in the book. She was actually told later by beings who were, that she described as tall whites. And in this induction, she actually had it with two other men, and it was one of those time experiences where they saw a crack and a light in the sky, and then she ended up having flashbacks later of something that happened during, it didn't even happen in missing time because it was in a time loop kind of sequence. And they don't even really meet at missing times at these things anymore. But what she realized, to make a long story short, was that the beings that took her, they took her and they were trying to wander with one of the men that she was with. And the men, they didn't remember anything. They stayed unconscious and tranced out through the whole process. But she got lucid during the abduction and was having basically a dialogue with these aliens who she described as tall whites, who looked like very tall grays, except they were white skinned, or very, very pale skinned. And then I guess the discussion went that these beings were going to see if she and this other man were able to have a connection with each other, because they saw and they observed in her energy field and the energy field of the other man that they had energy tendrils connecting to each other. And that seems to suggest from the aliens that they'd had some kind of previous connection, and that they were able to tell with certain people if they had karmic connections. And so with people who had a karmic connection, they were better able to catalyze and basically make the love connection happen more easily. So it's basically strengthening a pre-existing karmic bond and then catalyzing it to see if a love-bite connection will stick. So in her case, it didn't stick, but the aliens actually admitted to her, and I guess maybe they didn't think she remembered this, you know, when she came to later. But they told her that it was a delicacy for them, this energy that these people put when they had a strong connection. And they admitted to, you know, basically feeding on the energies as if it was a delicacy. So I thought this was a very interesting case because a series of synchronicities happened to this woman which wouldn't have ordinarily happened, that triggered her memory the same day or the next day while watching a movie. And everything happened in a synchronistic fashion, so that she would not have even remembered the abduction had she not had the memory triggered back to her soon after it happened. And she was like amazed that this actually happened. And the two other individuals with her, they didn't remember anything, and they didn't want to go through a hypnotic regression. So it just tells you that, you know, some people are very aware when they have an experience and they'll remember the whole thing, and other people, they're just tranced out or zombies, and they react on a subliminal level that something happens, but on a conscious level they don't know. Which is pretty scary when you think about it.
Yeah, it is. And hey, Eve, so what do you think with the darker stories, like a Mount Ricula story with the name?
Oh, Lord, that was probably one of the most severe cases, and there's actually 3 or 4 that were really severe in the Dark Side of Cupid, which I wanted to make sure people, you know, really got the feel for this. When you read these case histories, you're going to say beyond a shadow of doubt, oh, okay, it's like that. And so in that case, the gal was actually a pre-existing abductee who has had MILAB experiences. And at some point in her life, and I believe it was in 1991, that she was having problems with her current marriage, and she was having continued visitations by the aliens, and actually remembered a contact she had. There was telepathic communication going on where they were asking her about her marriage, and she actually asked for a better partner or a better situation because she was unhappy with the marriage. And some kind of exchange or bargain took place on this other level of reality, and I don't think she either admitted or remembered what this bargain was with the aliens, but they did grant her whatever she wanted, and then she saw the picture of a face of a man in her mind, like a blatant, like, bam, just showing you this vision of a person, and he had distinct features and this creepy laugh that she called like an evil laugh. And then, she kind of forgot about it until, 14 later, she meets this man that she recognizes, and they have a very instant connection with each other and an internet online networking site. They talk for several hours on the phone a day until they finally meet 8 months later, and it's like a match made in heaven, and it's a phenomenal connection. It's like classic. Until they start to notice the paranormal activity and the energy draining and the unusual features of this man named Count Rockula, who came off as if he was like a preacher on one hand and a healer and reciting biblical scriptures, and then on the other hand he was this rock star type, but he had a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of personality. Turns out this guy was a host for a non-human snake-like reptilian entity, and she did get energy vampirized in his presence. And so the whole story goes, and it, telling how she was drained in his presence. She'd have to take several naps for like 4 to 6 hours after being with him. And then the craziness and what I call the narcissistic, psychopathic behaviors of these, what I call hosted individuals that are being completely manipulated by this third-party entity to create the emotional highs and crafts and the complete craziness. But the thing with this Count Rockula Gwen situation, and there was actually another couple in the book, it's you'd think it would be easy for someone to say, well, this person's crazy, and why don't they just break up with him, But you have to understand, in these kinds of connections, the psychic connection and the sexual chemistry and the energy and the bonding is so addictive, it's like a drug. It's not something you could simply just walk away from. It's extremely powerful. It's very hypnotic and powerful. So it was hard for her to break up with him. The relationship went on for like 3 years and several breakups in between. But finally she did break up with him, and there was some scary things that had happened during the relationship, which is part of the explanation of the dark side of Cupid. The paranormal activity, the ghostly visits, the emotional highs and crashing lows and the energy draining and all that. But they had a mutually shared dream one night, and in her dream, I just went over it this evening because it was so unusual. It's like you'd see this in a horror movie. She dreamed that basically some spooky entity visited her and came from this fog that went through under the door and turned a man who basically said, "I am Satan." And she's in the dream vision. She's rushing for her Bible. And then Satan says to her, well, your Bible's not going to help you. I know everything in that book, and it's not going to help you. So in this dream with this Satan evil figure that appears, she basically tries to choke him and kill him. And then she wakes up, in a panic, after this horrid nightmare of trying to choke Satan. So at the same moment, her lover at the time, Count Rockula, who we're calling him his name, it's not his real name, obviously, he wakes up from a nightmare. But she didn't tell him what her nightmare was about, but he knew she had a nightmare, and she knew he was scared to death. And so he went to tell her his dream. And in his dream, I guess he had dreamed that he was trying to revive her to life, and she was dead because he had tried to strangle and choke her. So they had complementary dreams of the mutual same theme, which is really, really strange. But it went on, and they both got up, and there was a cold presence in the house, and it was like there was something there in their house. And she had the precognitive dreams of a horrific car accident, which happened exactly as they both dreamed it, 2 years later. And so strange things like that is definitely a sign that there's some kind of interference. I mean, that would be like obvious if you read this story. So anyway, and it took her quite a long time to heal and is still in the healing process. And these kind of things do take place. And to me, I wanted to know what the vulnerability factors are for people who are experiencing the more severe, what I call love bite connections with, let's say, the psychopathic partner who is overshadowed by a third-party entity. And in reality, there are some vulnerability factors that I go into the book, such as if you've been victimized before, if you were a victim of abuse, or if you've had lots of abductions and you grow up with this normalization of what I call, in therapy language, we call it learned helplessness. And that is, if you've been victimized all your life, you just kind of normalize being powerless in many situations or in relationships, or if you grew up seeing a parent abusing the other parent, you grow up thinking that it's normal for men to abuse women or women to abuse men or whatever. So sometimes those kinds of people are more likely to have partners like that later in life because they've gone through a lifetime of abuse. But in some cases that had come to me, that wasn't the case. They were just like normal people or confident, working women who were light workers and didn't know histories, which told me that there's a certain type of profile, which I think is a malevolent type of psychopathic figure, which targets people who have a lot of light. And that's, one reason why I wrote the book. I feel like that, like a mother who would need to warn her children that sometimes there are things out there that happen, and to protect yourself so that if you even remotely think something like this is happening, you could nip it in the bud right away before any damage is done. Because the people who have come to me, they're absolutely shocked. And not just women, but men too. So,
well, I've actually got a question for you. I'm wondering if you could tell me if I did the right thing, because after I had the experience with the whole one-way love bite, which, left me feeling like, I wish I didn't have to go through all that for, pretty much nothing. It was probably much more traumatic for the other person. Then there was another person that I came to know, and, I don't know what it was, but my God, we just clicked. Everything seemed completely and totally, it felt great. I'll just put it this way. I was to the point that I was about to sell everything that I had just for gas money to make a one-way trip up there just about. And, I damn near did it. I was this close, but then, having been burnt in the past and seeing what that does to people, I didn't want that to happen to me. I didn't want to be the person to do anything like that to her. It was really hard for me not to, but I didn't do anything. I'm still pretty good friends with this person, but I don't know, there's always just that kind of little twinge that makes things seem a little bit maybe more complicated in my head than they actually are, but I don't know. You think I did the right thing? I would have loved to have just let blindly off the cliff, but that don't always work out all the time.
It's hard to know. You have to assess how many, if you've seen this before and it's a pattern, sometimes it's good to pause and just...
Well, with her, she's been through this before, too, so, I believe we both kind of understood, what was going on here. There weren't any false misconceptions or anything like that.
Yeah. I think if communication is good between you and that partner, where you're pretty much on an open dialogue of what you're feeling, what you're sensing, maybe what some of your fears and concerns are, and to fully put it out there on the table so that there doesn't have to be any secrets, then that's a better chance of something working out, or at least being honest. And that's hard to do when you're dealing with weird alien stuff. Who wants to talk about that, right?
It's really hard to work out in your head, too, because, I actually had this pretty poignant dream about her. I've been lucid dreaming since I was about 8 years old, so, to me, there are real dreams, and then there are things that aren't quite dreams. Well, to make a long dream short, in this one, I just was all of a sudden, up there to see her at her place. I was trying to protect her from things. There was something coming at the night. We both tried our damnedest to fight it, but still ended up being lured into unconsciousness by this thing anyway, and, achieving the same old results. And, just having a dream like that, you got to sit there and wonder. It's like, okay, is this my subconscious trying to chew this over in my head and, creating some kind of little situation about it? Or is this a little bit more than a dream? You never...
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one good thing that you learned how to lucid dream from an early age, because then maybe you're able to tell what kind of dream feels normal, what kind of dream feels like it's being orchestrated, or if you're really tuning into someone's energy field. If you're really psychic and aware, I mean, that's what shamans do. Shamans could enter someone else's dream space and truly interact with that person on, let's say, the astral level or within their mind space. And then I think that aliens can do this too. I called it in the dream. There was a case where a gal called it her dream assailants, the dream hacker assailants, and she would perceive these beings that she found out later were grays, but in her symbolic imagery in her own subconscious whatever mind, she saw them as robbers and thieves wearing black. But when she became more lucid, she realized that they were aliens, and they were the same aliens responsible for her case. They kept disrupting love relationships with a man that she wanted to be with, that she was in love with, and they kept disrupting it so that they would never be able to get together. Kind of like the movie, the Adjustment Bureau, where they really want to get together with someone.
That movie, but nobody I know has seen it.
Has seen? Say that again.
The
movie?
Yeah, it was a great movie, but everybody that I know has not seen it, so I have nobody to talk to it with it about.
Oh, I just thought that was a great movie. That was good. Yeah, I mean, I could relate to it because it appears in at least several of the cases that are in the new book, that there was the good cop, bad cop scene with the good ET, bad ET situation where a couple they were with one partner, and then, it's kind of complicated. It's the story of Becky and Cecil, and in that story, they both were abductees. The guy that she was in love with was a MILAB and had abductions, and he apparently had benevolent guides who told him that he was going to be in contact with this woman, and synchronicities happened so that they met, but then there was like this war between the bad ETs trying to disrupt it while the good ETs were trying to get them together. There was a situation like that going on. So that's pretty interesting, because it shows that there's obviously dark forces that appear to be trying to prevent true love and soulmate situations, because I've seen that being reported. And then so they're setting up like a counterfeit type of situation. So that's something to watch for, and one of the things that I wanted to delineate in my book, well, how do you tell, is this a real soulmate, or is this like the fake kind of thing, and how would I know the difference between the real true thing and something that's being manipulated, because in both cases you feel a powerful connection with that other person, especially if it's more on your end where you're really feeling a powerful connection. So I'm saying that the connection is not false, because the connection is real. I mean, you could definitely have a real connection with someone who's maybe not meant to be that soulmate partner for you, but it can be catalyzed along by alien technology, or even maybe a type of sorcery or black magic, for all I know.
So, Eve, my question is, when it comes to the darker side of this and the beings that are involved, I mean, life is hard enough with just surviving that we got to worry about, asshat beings messing with our life, And I mean, I believe this happens, and I believe they do. And right before you mentioned vulnerabilities, I had a quote from your book that I was about to say, and then you said that right afterwards. Black holes in one's emotional being will create windows of vulnerabilities. So you went right into that before I could ask it. But the thing that I'm trying to get to is, I believe this happens, but why do the beings do this? Why are they allowed to do it by the forces that be? And then I have rational side of me that's like, it's kind of like people blaming the devil for everything, like the Spanish Inquisition. Some people Everything that goes wrong, it's the devil. So I have this battle with it. Like, I believe that there are beings that do it, but I still kind of have a struggle about it, too, with the both sides of that.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly don't want to make excuses and blame everything on the aliens, and I could understand that point of view. And I guess the only way to truly know is to expand your awareness on more and more subtle levels of reality and of energy, and then be able to actually observe with other aspects of your being. You can call it your third eye or your gut instinct or your intuition. We're able to tell influences in your life and how energy dances and plays and affects other people. Even our thoughts and emotions can affect someone else at a distance or that we're close to. Even if we don't speak it, I believe our feelings can affect someone and they may respond in some way. And likewise, sometimes if there's an entity or a ghost or even an alien, they can influence people, and that can happen. And people who are clairvoyant can perceive the entity and how the entity may be causing distractions. And this is something that like indigenous shamans and curanderos and certain psychic healers will do. They'll be able to perceive higher levels of reality or more subtle levels of reality and see, okay, well, there's this happening and this is why that's happening. So it depends on the awareness of the person. So, and I think there's technology, too, that could be responsible for creating some of these anomalous things that people are experiencing. I mean, certainly know this with the targeted individuals and the non-lethal weapons technology. And that's a whole subject in and of itself.
Yeah, I just wanted to,
your awareness.
if I could, I just wanted to give a couple examples of some that I've been in, just briefly. I had my first experience with, being in a relationship with a contactee, and I guess that was when it first kind of started. I was dating someone, and everything was going okay, and then things got kind of bad with arguments and stuff like that. And then suddenly, one day out of the blue, she tells me that she had an alien experience, and they told her that she was an obstacle to my life and keeping me from writing a book I still haven't wrote, by the way. And that was my first weird experience of being with someone that just came out of the blue with weird alien stuff. And I've had alien experiences before experiences, and I've had paranormal activity in my life all my life. And after my father's death and being healed from cancer, I kind of had a shamanic death of sorts and had a lot of weird stuff happen to me. But my second time was with a former Bud Hopkins patient. Well, not patient, I don't know if that's the right word, but she worked with him and went under and all that stuff. I guess patients, our client, I don't know, patient-client. And that one started off really good, and then it just got crazy. Like, there was a point to where she was mad at me for 2 weeks for eating all the guacamole, and it just went to hell. So that one ended terribly. So I definitely believe I've been through them and it happened. I'm just, gathering data in your book. There's some things in here that I quoted from you about love and stuff. I mean, this is not all just about the dark side of everything. I mean, there's a quote from you in there that says, divine love comes from a place that is beyond time and space. It is the primordial aspect of our soul. Its essence is immortal because it is pre-existent within our souls, inherent light, and not to be begged for, and to be connected with the source of creation. So, I mean, you have some pretty great quotes in there on love and stuff like that. I guess I'm trying to figure out the beings who do this, why they do it. I'm struggling with why they do it.
But I believe that it's about a type of energy vampirism, and this kind of this goes along with some of the work, not only that I observed with energy vampirism, but in Dr. Corrado Malanga's research, and he's researched the alien abduction issue for 20-plus years at least, and he believes in his work that the souls, that the aliens are after the soul energy, as the soul energy acts as a battery for them, that for many of the ones who are abducting, and I think there's different kinds of beings, so I'm not saying all beings lack a soul, but it appears that certain types of alien beings and the incorporeal beings that are hosting our energy body, they're tapping into our soul energy because they lack that component in their beingness. based on wherever they're from in whatever other universe, that there appear to be parasitic beings who feed off the human soul. And so that's the theory. I believe that that's a big part of it, because why else would they be doing things like this? It's feeding off the energy. So why can't they tap into their own divine source? And this kind of goes back to, if you look at psychopathology, for example, in human beings, that a person who is so disconnected from their own source of being would actually be disconnected in a way that they're going to need to get that energy from someone else. And we actually see this with classic emotional vampires, or what I call the narcissist psychopath type person. And in trauma, for example, we can get disconnected from our soul when we have dissociation. And so if the dissociation is severe, we basically get de-linked from our soul core. And it happens on an automatic level with people who've gone through trauma anyway. But if those things are not healed and integrated, then actually we can become more vampiristic in our behaviors. And this happens with, like, human beings who are, let's say, the borderline personality disorder, or the drama queens, or the histrionic personality disorder, the narcissistic personality disorder. We see that kinds of behavior. But that's actually different from the kind that we see with the aliens and with the people who are literally hosted or taken over by another type of entity. And I think that entity possession, when we start talking about possession issues, I believe that there's certain vulnerability factors for possession. So it kind of goes into different religious ideologies, but I think there's a vulnerability that can happen if someone is very dissociated from themselves, or they basically leave their body, or if they don't want to work on it and they get addicted to drugs and alcohol or evil behaviors, crime, then they could attract these malevolent entities that work through them. So there's different ways you can become vulnerable to these kinds of malevolent forces. It doesn't mean that it's your fault, for example, in every case, because some people are just completely innocent and just thrown for a loop when these things happen.
Well, it's kind of a corollary. Erica's brought up an interesting point in a virtual auditorium. She says that some people blame emotional vampirism on other people when, in fact, it is really them doing it. I mean, I've come across cases where that statement is definitely proven true. Have you come across any similar cases like that?
Wait, can you repeat the question? It wasn't quite clear.
Her statement was more or less, some people blame emotional vampirism on other people, but in fact it's really them doing it. I mean, I've come across cases like that. And have you come across anything like that too?
Oh, yeah, or maybe people, I mean, we're all human, right? We all need one another, and sometimes if we're in a bad mood or we're feeling hurt and we really need to talk to someone, and we could be taking energy from someone else because we're really feeling like we're needing love and needing connection with someone else. I mean, that could happen where we're disconnected from our source and feeling like we have to get that from someone else all the time, and that could make us act in an energy vampiring way. It could be us, being really, really needy and clingy, for example. But if we truly connect to our divine core, like how the yogis say and some of the mystics, the more we're really connected into that divine reality of who we are, the more of a fullness and a rootedness and a confidence we have in just feeling that love in a way that it comes out of us more freely, and we're less needy in a clingy kind of way. So that's actually an antidote against energy vampirism, that the more we connect with that inner, the less likely we will be to energy vampirize other people, and the less vulnerable we will be to others, invading our boundaries all the time.
I've got a question that I've never considered this one myself either. But have you ever had any interactions with any children that are the results of one of these potential love bite relationships?
That's a good question, because usually it's an adult issue because it involves sexuality and, sexual attractions and love connections. So I don't know. a child reporting. Usually children are not aware and don't report it. They usually report it to their parents or something of something.
Well, I didn't mean like the children themselves actually having a love bite experience. I mean like children that are the product of a love bite experience.
Oh, I see. Well,
I mean, I think it'd be interesting to do a study of children like that, you know, to see what kind of, you know, traits and abilities that they might have, and and just general, just what kind of people they are.
Yeah, because this is kind of off the subject, but I was reading in a shamanic book that if two parents have a true, powerful, you know, love soul connection where they're able to, you know, experience like intense passion and orgasm during conception, that child who's a product of that kind of conception, let's say a tantric connection between the two, has a more powerful full spirit and would be more spiritually strong. Whereas maybe a child that's a product of less than that may have a less strong spirit. So there could be something to that maybe the aliens know about, or people who have a greater spiritual understanding of what really takes place in conception in terms of the spirit and the soul, you know. But that's kind of beyond my level of research. So I would think that true love and passion and a powerful tantric connection is going to produce a more extraordinary human being, but that's just intuition. That doesn't really mean that's true. Because there's wonderful people in the world who've had horrible childhoods and who are miracles, you know. So I couldn't say that that's true, but it makes me wonder if true love really conceives a better product, you know.
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, at least in the nature versus nurture debate, that, you know, having two parents that are that connected like that, you know, and both pouring their love into their child, I don't see how that could necessarily be a bad thing.
No. And, you know, there are people who are in the love bite. I think the first book, and other people who have come to me, who are not necessarily in the book, that believe that they actually had a child from a love bite connection on a craft with another individual, and then where that person got pregnant, and then they actually had the child of the person that they were bonded with in the abduction, who's really, you know, somebody else's child, but happened through alien engineering. And people report that, or they believed that the person they saw later in life, that was really the mother of their child, or the child that they have with another husband. They really think of kind of a situation. And I've had people report that, and who knows if that's true. You know, you'd have to do a genetic test. And I think Daryl Sims actually had a case or two like that, where the child was actually someone else's.
Yeah, you know, a lot of us contactees kind of, you know, it's almost an inside joke. It's like, well, how do I know you so well? Well, maybe we met on the ship. You know, it's a half joke, but, you know, a lot of times I believe there might be something to that. And we actually got another question from Erica, and, well, I'd have to say this is an interesting one. She wants to know, is it common for victims to have a fetish, you know, possibly as a result from being trained or manipulated into a certain way?
Well, like a fetish for what? Like any particular fetish, or?
I don't know, I'm guessing, well, she just said it to confirm, I guess, some type of sexual fetish.
Well, you know, it's hard to say. Sometimes I wonder if aliens condition certain people to only want a certain kind of partner, like, oh, I'm programmed for the Nordic type or whatever, and then maybe it's really programming, and then all the partners you choose happen to be a certain cutout of this program.
Yeah, I can kind of see where she's coming from, you know, from the question. I mean, you kind of have to wonder, maybe somebody that's, like, into, like, some kind of major submission type thing. I mean, who knows? But perhaps, you know, they did learn that behavior, get used to it, you know, due to some encounter that they had on the ship or whatnot.
Well, that could be. I know that there was a case in my first book where one of the men claimed that the aliens gave him his choice of whatever female he wanted, and I don't know what it was in exchange for, but that was an unusual memory. But in the reptilian cases, like one of them in my book, see, Bernie and Michelle, is the one in Dark Side of Cupid, she actually experienced sexual, a shift in her sexual behaviors and likes and dislikes, as if she was under programming. And then, this guy was into S&M and stuff, and she became, it's almost under like a hypnotic spell by this man who was hosted by a non-human entity, and that she engaged in she never had engaged in before, and was like addicted to him but couldn't understand what was going on. So those kind of things can happen. They're more on the more extreme end of the scale. You don't really, hear about that as much.
So, Eve, this is Jeffrey. I have a question. I know in your book you go into Michelle Bellinger. I think I said her last name right.
Yes.
The psychic vampire codex, and I've interviewed Father Sebastian before, another person that writes some strange vampire type books. I'm just curious, what do you think about the people who are embracing this and making it some kind of subculture?
Well, I did read, Michelle Bellinger's book, and in her case, she believes that it's actually a true race of people who tend to recognize this in themselves as a past life type of origin that happened in Egypt. And, I really don't know, and I don't know if there's certain, quote, human vehicles or containers that have a inability to process energy as easily as others. And I've heard that there are actually races of other kinds of human beings that truly are a type of vampire, and it's like they're genetically different. And I've heard this from others, where they literally feed it. And, I met one person who had an encounter twice with, like, a real energy vampire type of person that she believed was genetically different. Or it was different than the cases in my book, for example. And there's people who believe that, and, I really don't know. In my view, it was more likely to be either disconnected from the core because of trauma, and they're like a borderline personality disorder, a psychopath, or they have a non-human, entity overshadowing them that's using them as a portal for their energy vampirism. That's more likely what I've seen, at least in my book. Although I've heard that there are true races of humans who truly are different, and you can even tell it in their skin tone. They really do look different. But it's very rare. You don't hear about that as often.
Yeah, it's weird because when I was in high school, like I've said before, I went through cancer and went through chemo and all that stuff. And during that time, I latched on the Anne Rice books heavily. I was 17 and dying, and I was reading Anne Rice books and Interview with the Vampire and stuff, and kind of escaping into that on some level. And I was going through chemo at 17, so, immortal people seemed pretty nice at that time. But when I came back from school, when I came back to school after being healed, I've been healed over 16 years, people called me a vampire. They also called me Powder from that movie, that little skinny bald guy Powder with the movie.
Oh, yeah.
To a field and goes through the sky because I had no hair and I was really pale. So I've dealt with people like calling me that name, the vampire name, before, and I've always kind of been interested in the culture, but I'm not the type of person. I wonder on some level, like my girlfriend as well, that we do have some kind of psychic vampire thing that maybe it's not like I want it. I just wonder if it's like from trauma. I've been through a lot of different things in my life, and when you get wounded, does this like negative energy come through you, or perhaps like you seen tries to come through you and it kind of uses you for the battery, so to speak? I'm just curious to your overall thoughts on like wounds, and if you get two people together who have these wounds, it's more susceptible, definitely, to the dark side of Cupid, which you kind of label a sociopathic parasite or an alien virus in your book.
Yeah, that could happen if the people are disconnected from their core. Then they'll have, let's say, a more codependent relationship. And in a codependent relationship, you're seeking to draw out from the other person what you feel that you don't have on your own, and so you draw from each other. And I listened to an interview Lisa Harrison did with a gal named Kelly LaShaw, And Kelly LaShaw is a energy healer, shamanic energy healer. And in one of her interviews on her website, and I guess also in that interview with Lisa, she talked about how at an early age she was able to perceive energy humans, let's say, in regular relationships. And she was able to perceive with her, quote, psychic vision, whether two people had an equal relationship. They were equally giving and receiving in this energetic flow of relationship between one another, where, let's say, people are deeply rooted in their own beingness, and there's like this even flow of give and take, and it's like the flow of regular, like, relating of people in a healthy, loving relationship. But she said she also noticed she was able to perceive when people had a codependent thing going on, where they were literally pulling energy from others, and she was able to perceive this and know that those were like unhealthy relationships. So, and even in, I'm going off in another direction, but in my Dark Side of Cupid book, I go into an author named Joe Slate, who is also a researcher, scholar. He's written many, many books on psychic phenomena, but also psychic vampirism. And Joe Slate was able to do scientific research of studying the Kirlian photography of human auras, either of like a thumbprint or the whole human aura, and see how the energy field is manifested in the Kirlian photography and video, I guess. But he was able to tell like a regular aura of someone who had full of energy, and then the aura of someone who was an energy vampire, and then the aura of someone who had just been around an energy vampire. And he was able to tell, like in the energy field, where you saw a break in the energy field where it created these breaks in the energy field. And go on to say that in energy vampires, if someone is psychic and they have paranormal vision or whatever, they're able to tell that supposedly the true psychic vampire actually has a different aura, and they may have all these like weird octopus-like tendrils, and they come out and shoot out at people and can wrap around people in unusual ways. So I guess the only way you could tell is if you have the perceptive paranormal vision, or if you can just feel it. And you'll know it when you're around someone who's an energy vampire, because you do literally feel drained, and it's a distinct sensation. Sometimes you could feel it in your solar plexus or in your heart, or you'll get a pain in a certain part of your body, which is your red flag saying there's something that's just invaded my energy field, and you could literally sense it. Like the gal in my book, for example, Gwen, and the Count Rockula, she would immediately get these weird stomach aches. And that didn't happen to her in other relationships. And then the case with Wiz and Corral, the woman psychic vampire, and he literally felt the contorting knot in his solar plexus, and also in the back, on his back, there was like an entity that kept trying to attach on his back. So there are sensations where you could tell something's happening.
Now, I've got a question, about the whole psychic vampirism thing in general. Now, I know what you mean about, the energy field. I mean, I can feel when somebody's trying to intrude on my space that, over time I've developed a pretty good ability to just sort of block that out and ignore it, and that becomes a factor. But actually, I think both of you could probably answer this question, because it's a little bit out of my realm of expertise. But when you're being preyed on by a psychic vampire, I mean, if there's some entity out there that is drawing some kind of positive benefit from somebody that's experiencing negative emotions, I mean, well, the way empathy works is it's kind of, in most cases, it's a two-way thing. You can sort of feel what the other entity is experiencing. Yeah, have you ever heard of anybody that can feel that, I guess you would call it perverse pleasure that some of these entities get out of, basically feeding off somebody who's going through emotional trauma and pain?
Well, I mean, I don't know if the recipient, the emotional drama, is getting off on it. I mean, in the, quote, love bite connection, when you have the psychic connection going on between two of them, where, let's say, the chakras are being activated, and it can also be a pleasurable sensation, which is kind of the vampire. The whole romance of the vampire is that when they tap into your energy field, a lot of times it's a very pleasurable sensation. You feel this pull and this draw that's almost intoxicating when you feel that connection, but it's also draining. So that happens more within the sexual connection thing. It can be pleasurable even though you know it's like not good. But in terms of, I don't see anybody finding pleasure of causing emotional pain unless they're angry and they're like passive aggressive and just wanting to hurt the person. You know.
There are some out there that, you know, they believe that their lives are, you know, such train wrecks because, you know, they actually get a feeling that, you know, something's feeding off of the trauma. And I don't know, I was just kind of wondering your opinion on the whole thing.
Well, I mean, I wrote the book because people were deeply affected, and one of the things that was difficult was the lingering psychic connection between those who were bonded together or those who had a connection with somebody who had the third-party entity, for example. And even after the couple broke up, a lot of times what would happen is the entity that was overshadowing the other partner would still visit and sexually have sexual linking going on. And that was really destructive. They just couldn't stop getting this person out of their head. They knew that this entity was still linking in, even though they no longer physically had connection with that partner. And that was one of the more difficult things because the linking lasted sometimes for years. And they didn't know what was going on. So that could be the difficult part. Once you understand what it is, you work with the shaman prayer, you do meditation, you do whatever it is to cut that link. And then feel your energy field and try not to obsess about that other partner and just really clear the feelings and the thoughts associated with the obsession, because the obsession will fuel that connection. So you want to, you know, really cut the obsession part.
Yeah, there's some static, and I don't know where it's coming from. I have a bad storm in my area, so I don't know if it's affecting my phone at all. But I hear it. It sounds like someone with a car window open.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know if everyone else hears. There's some static, and some people are saying crystal clear here, and others are saying distorted in the room. So, hell if I know. I hear it. Some say they don't. But let's continue the show anyway. We'll just, I guess, talk a little bit louder. I guess what I'm wondering is, when it comes to a being that's using you for psychic vampirism or coming through your wounds, or a being that you obviously, if I have one, which maybe I do or maybe I don't know, I don't want it here. How do you get rid of it? What's the cure? I feel like that's Vampire Morbius in the comic book looking for the cure to vampirism. What's the cure to this? I mean,
well, you know, that's 1/3 of the book. I mean, that's why I did 1/3 of the book on how to nip it in the bud, like how to get harmony in the relationship and communication and all that is to nurture the love if it's okay enough to say. But the other part was, doing the appropriate grieving work for unhealed wounds and to emotional awareness processing, whether it's inner child work or insight meditation, body-mind connection like Tai Chi, yoga, really getting in connection with the whole body-mind-heart connection. And that when we reconnect with those parts of ourselves, we may become aware of unhealed wounds or old things that we've shoved in the recesses of our subconscious, and then those things come to awareness, and then those wounds are healed. So it's, the healing process is really important. And I think for people who've had alien abductions, as much as many people would think it's not traumatic or think their beings are good, there's still some hidden trauma there. And to really heal as many wounds as they can, not only from that, but from their families of origin, they're able to have healthy relationships and know what's their energy and what's not their energy. And that takes work right there. But in terms of getting rid of let's say, a marauding entity that won't stop linking into you, sometimes it takes going to a shamanic healer or a psychic healer or doing a lot of prayer work. You can get together with a group of people and just do a heavy prayer session, doing your own prayers, meditation, delinking, and working with an energy worker I found helpful. And then Dr. Corrado Malongo's techniques were very successful for many, and I'm not saying for all, but they were certainly significant enough to definitely worth trying. And those are geared towards abductees. So but they still work for if there's a parasite, bugging you, basically.
I was wondering if you. Oh, thank you. So, I'm wondering if you've ever tried any hypnotic regressions to, try to go in and decode some of the, hidden information behind a love bite. Have you done any work in that area of the field?
Yes. There are ways to, do hypnotic regressions to find out what happened. Although now I believe that the most important thing is to first do what you can to connect deeply with yourself and your soul to delete the alien interference, and then work on the memory work, because maybe it's less likely to get manipulated. Because if aliens are still tapped into your energy field through implants or what I call the incorporeal parasites, they can affect what memories surface or what memories don't surface, because they're still controlling and manipulating aspects of your mind and spirit and energy field. So I believe that, first get rid of the interference in what ways you can, and then you work on the memories. But you have to work. I feel it's real important for the people to be psychologically and emotionally ready to handle memories, because with memories come feelings more often than not, and they have to be able to handle those feelings. And a lot of the times the reason why people don't remember is because they can't handle the feelings associated with the shock and reality of what that experience was. So that's why I think therapeutic work is really, really important. Run out really with hypnosis and write, that's actually dangerous. Yeah, and if you wanted to know details, like Barbara Bartholick's work, she did some extraordinary work, and I wished more of her stuff could be published, but she's dead now, unfortunately. But in the work that she did with Ted Rice in the Masquerade of Angels book written by Dr. Carlett, it was Barbara Bartholick who did the hypnotic regressions with Ted to recount a lot of the things that happened to him, which at the time was absolutely shocking and unbelievable. But in that book, and I recounted this in The Love Bite, was what he remembered under hypnotic regression of what happened when he was put together with a 14-year-old girl where they were in a bonding alien love bite situation, and what the aliens did and how they bonded his energy field out of his heart chakra. I guess they took her energy from her heart out and into him and weaved it in, so that the moment they did that, he had an instantaneous soul connection feeling and falling in love with that woman. So the aliens actually had a technology and almost like a surgical energetic procedure that took place to bond them together. But it was one of those one-sided love bites where he received the energy from her heart into his, but they did not reverse the process of his energy into her heart. So he was really tuned into her, but she really wasn't tuned into him, so it was a one-sided love obsession on his end. So in that case, it really described exactly, how that took place. So that takes a lot of work.
Well, Eve, like I said, I'm a cancer survivor, and then shortly after that, my father died, who was mentally abusive and physically abusive, luckily not sexually abusive. And basically, right after all that happened to me, I started looking into the spiritual and occult and stuff like that, like nothing too crazy, like Enochian magic and stuff like that. Oh. And I started to have UFO experiences, and I actually had an experience where I seen beings that I guess people would consider reptilian. I always said they were the serpentines, and I've seen beings of light as well. So I think I had so much happen to me. It reminds me of that Nine Inch Nails song, Head Like a Hole. It's like I just became a black hole from all the trauma. So I think I've been trying to heal from that on so many levels all my life, from just going through all that at such a young age. And I do think I deal with it on some level. I mean, I've never been in a fist fight since high school. A prison record's just a joint once in disorderly conduct. So I've never, I'm pretty laid back, everybody says. Occasionally I'll have some crazy weird moods, but I don't lash out violently at anyone or anything. My mouth and fingers get me in a lot of trouble online, and if I get in an argument or something like that. That's most of my problem, like with stuff like that. Like when I get angry, I don't get violent. I just get in trouble with words. a lot of times. Yeah. But I think I'm just definitely I'm just trying to figure out. It seems like on some level, what is your spiritual belief system? Is it, because a lot of things, I mean, Christianity has spiritual warfare, and, I mean, not many other belief systems really do that.
I noticed that.
Indian.
Yeah, some shamanic traditions definitely, they understand that reality is part of their culture, and they don't talk about it just because they know that this is from this or this is from that, and so they're able to assess it and hear how they perceive a situation. And then in Christianity, at least they understand, and in the Bible they talk all about, spiritual warfare and how these things manifest and what to do. But in other traditions, they're not so clear what to do. And I think that spiritual warfare is real, and that there is a greater good that can be our ally if we are really truly connected in oneness with that. And in my view, I'm more of a Buddhist and a Gnostic mystic kind of way of perceiving. If we really want to tap into the power of God, we have to truly connect with it from within by doing the healing work. If there's any unhealed wounds, we have to heal those wounds and replace it with compassion and with letting go and forgiveness, and just have the intention to connect something greater and more loving, and then that power works through you to strengthen you. And that truly is a strength. The greatest strength is tapping into that divine essence, that we all have a divine core in us. It's just learning how to connect with that instead of seeing it from outside of ourselves.
I've been trying to shamanism a lot. I'm not going to go around and say, I'm a shaman, because I feel funny saying that. But I've studied it a lot and interviewed a lot of medicine men and stuff like that, and I'm very attracted to that belief system. If I had to label myself, I jokingly say ufologist, occultist, shaman with a dash of Christianity that bugs me all the time because I'm from the South. So,
okay.
I'm attracted to shamanism a lot, though. It's a lot. Like on Examiner, I just interviewed a bunch of shamans that are fixing to turn in their answers on the show. So that maybe that's me trying to heal myself, I guess, on some level, trying to seek out that knowledge, that wisdom.
Learn. I'm actually reading a couple of books by James Andretti. And he's a shaman. I guess he lives in California now, but he studied with many of the South American and Mexican shamans. And what I really admired about his work and his stories was the point blank talked about the reality of supernatural battles that take place. Sometimes they're witches or evil sorcerers, and sometimes they were shamanic initiations to develop his own awareness and to learn how to deal with that world. But that world is very real, and many cultures understand this. And I think there's a reality of supernatural battles that are happening probably all the time. We're just, in this Western culture, we're just kind of naive about that, or that they may see it through just a simple biblical way, and that's information, in my view. I think there's more to it.
I'm familiar with James, and I just have trouble saying his last name because I'm from Georgia, but I'm actually in the process of reading Lightning in the Blood and have his other book. Isn't that right?
Oh, you're kidding. That was a good one. My friend, in fact, one of the people in my book, suggested that book because she said it sparked in her, realizations and synchronicities that she really needed to read his books in order to understand how to deal with certain supernatural battles that were actually taking place in a current relationship. And I won't say the names, but in this relationship this woman has, it's another love bite kind of situation, although I don't think they remember being bonded together. They just have a very, very strong connection, which there's an energetic feel to what we call a love bite, and it's just a really strong connection with some kind of paranormal interference. But in her case, she had to learn how to deal with a supernatural battle with an entity that was associated with her partner that had to do with a bloodline familiar spirit. And then this kind of thing would be, he was from a bloodline where there was a lot of abuse or bad things that had happened, and maybe there was some occult involvement. There's certain Illuminati bloodlines that have what I call familiar spirits attached to them, and so sometimes they have to deal with the familiar spirit interfere with that person's relationships. So there's different kinds of interference, but in her case, she found James Andretti's books very helpful because it seemed to explain some of the things that were happening in her case that were a little more complex. There's a lot of different ways of looking at this, you know?
Yeah, definitely. There was one thing I want to interest me that you said in your book. I wrote it all out. It's kind of long, but I'll read it as clearly and loud as I can. Let me see. Blaming the victim is a prevailing trend today, especially in New Age circles, where the concept is your reality if you ever encounter a true psycho become involved in a relationship with one. That mantra will be of no use to you. I find that interesting because this is me now. I was reading your quote, but this is my notes I wrote next to it. I find that interesting because in the self-help spiritual books like Wayne Dyer and the Abraham teachings from the Hicks, and there's some other books like Conversations with God that I enjoy a lot. And they say that we create our own reality. And that, you know, that they also say that we signed up for this. And I'm like, yeah, I signed up for testicular cancer when I was 17. Yeah, right. Come on, give me a break.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle covered that. I mean, he basically said, okay, so there's some poor little starving kid in Africa that's practically a skeleton, and it's his fault that he's sitting there starving to death because he should have been visualizing a sandwich. I mean, a lot of those beliefs are just absolutely ridiculous.
I think that it's pabulum. I mean, sometimes, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but in, let's say, Ati Yoga meditation, Buddhist Ati Yoga, and in Advaita Vedanta, there are ways to view things and understand things, but there comes a point, even in our own self-realization, that we don't always have perfect control over everything. Sometimes things happen that we really don't have control over. We don't really have control over other people. But I think someone has to come to a realization in their own lives that a lot of this New Age stuff, and the reason why I said that is I noticed a lot of New Age platitudes where the people were recanting these spiritual laws, but they weren't living them, and because there was no compassion in their lives. There was no demonstrativeness of compassion and wisdom in their lives. And when you interact with what I call true enlightened masters and yogis and rinpoches and lamas, you'll know the difference, believe me. And they don't rant and rave like a lot of these New Age people, okay? I mean, truly enlightened people are so full of compassion, so full of wisdom that...
Some will, like maybe if you do it, like there's a book called Quantum of which I like is called New Energy Science Manifestation, and it's like information, and they're kind of about creating your reality. And I did them, and I had like some amazing luck with articles, like people viewing them like off the roof, like next thing you know they're on coast to coast and stuff like that. But I think there's some truth to it, but I don't think we sit up in the afterlife if you believe we come here and incarnate and stuff like that. Sociopath check, car wreck check. You know, I have trouble buying that. But I think we can really visualize and manifest some stuff. But you know, I don't know. I struggle with that.
If there's unconscious repressed material, you don't know how that's affecting what reality is being created. So if you truly wanted to manifest your reality with perfect, quote, control, your subconscious and conscious minds must be perfectly blended and aware. So that means you basically have to be nearly enlightened to be able to affect that true manifestation. That's my view, because whatever's in the subconscious, you don't have perfect control over unless it becomes aware. And plus, there's what they call karma, you know, and if there's karma, certain lesson, then who's to say? I don't know. I think that we don't find out until we're older. Sometimes you don't realize a true lesson of something that's happened to you until 20 years later down the road you completely realize, oh, maybe that's why this happened to me, and maybe my higher self and my soul created this reality so that I could finally come to a place of wisdom and selflessness down the road. But sometimes you don't know these things until years and years and years later through the wisdom of your years. So you just have to realize.
You know, I think maybe the years have made me a little bit cynical, because whenever I imagine a world that anybody can bring what they want about, you know, by their own intention, I see a world filled with people driving Bugattis and living in mansions, but still bickering and fighting over the same crap we do to this very same day.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, a lot of these things I think are being fed to the ego and to desires to make them more selfish in some ways than, you know, a truly enlightened person.
Well, you know, when you think about the intention thing, too, it's like, how many people really, truly can honestly say they know exactly what they want out of life, the universe, and everything, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I'm 33, and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up.
Sometimes you don't know until you live life and you experience things, and people change their careers many times during their life. Sometimes you just don't know what you want to do. And, yeah, I think people who assume that they can create the reality perfectly, I think they're deluded, unless they're truly enlightened, but I don't see that in the New Age community. And if they're truly enlightened, they don't even talk about it. They don't even, you know, they don't even admit to that.
You know, I see a lot of the same problems that I do in the ufology community, I mean, in the New Age community, that I do in the ufology and the paranormal community in general. I mean, you know, yeah, there are some people out there that I believe are worth listening to, that I have it right, and on the other side of it, I believe that they're out there telling people what they want to hear, whether there's any truth behind it or not.
Yeah. I mean, I think unhealed wounds and lack of wisdom and understanding could create a lot of problems and a lot of negativity. And if people don't take a look at those issues, they may have unusual things happen to them and not know why. You know, I mean, if you're from a family line where there was black magic being practiced, sometimes those manifestations could happen to you and your downline without you having done anything to deserve it. It's just a family curse, and family curses do happen. So, and that's actually, the Bible even talks about that. There are some things that happen simply because of a genetic bloodline you're in.
There's a lead bite related question. Have you noticed, like, you know, the whole lead bite thing happening to people in, continuing generations? You know, grandma, mom, and granddaughter all have the same things happening at some point in their life.
Oh, that's good. Well, we know that there are people who've had abductions, you know, were they able to trace it back to their grandmothers? Well, I mean, true abduction research really wasn't started until Bud Hopkins and some of the earlier ones. So really, we can only know that there have been several generations now, probably, you know, grandchildren now, who are having experiences too. But whether or not they're, well, I mean, I've had some, but not very many cases where they're that aware of that happening. It's that's yet to be discovered, I think.
Yeah, I was talking to one of our, you know, especially like a lot of the historical cases. I mean, I think we've kind of come to the end of the line in being able to get any information out there, because, I mean, you know, the World War II generation is starting to die. I mean, a lot of the Vietnam generation is kind of starting to tick off nowadays. So, I mean, there's information out there that, you know, we're potentially going to lose.
Yeah.
Okay, that really is, we lost Jeff for a moment, and we're trying to get him back on. Jeff, you there with us?
Here's Johnny. I'm here.
Welcome back.
We lost him.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, it could be this bad weather out here. There's like some tropical weird thing in Florida at the Panhandle, so it could just be my phone. I don't.
Well, you know, one of the reasons why I wrote the second book, though, is just kind of cap some things up, is that I wanted to actually do this to more of a, I actually originally intended it for more of a mainstream audience towards self-help relationships, so that when they saw these unusual kinds of things happening within a love relationship, they would be able to recognize the signs and symptoms and be able to deal with it, and then really recognize it for what it is by just calling it maybe a paranormal, so that a larger audience would be able to recognize these kinds of things and nip it in the bud and be able to find healing before it became a very, very painful reality. Because I think when people even hear the alien or the UFO word or the extraterrestrial word, they kind of clam up and want to consider it, you know, kooky, crazy stuff. But in my view now, from what I've been doing for 20 plus years, I believe this alien influence, this paranormal influence, is larger than the population that we traditionally have seen this coming from, like the people who's having alien encounters. It's much larger than that population, and I think it's happening to many more people, and it's just that they're not aware of what it is, and they never were able to recognize it for what it really is, that there's still a veil of, like cataracts over the vision to really see what's happening. But as we gain more clarity of what's happening on more subtle levels, we're able to identify that these things really are real, that there is a paranormal influence, and it really is greater than just those two people in many cases. It doesn't mean I'm making excuses for not people to work on things, but these things are real. We know the alien influence on society is greater than what people, I think, are willing to admit. That the influence is much greater than abductions, let's put it that way.
Well, I think that's pretty much the best way that you can possibly take it, Eve. I mean, I think that you've done a lot of good work already in, bringing up awareness on this particular topic, and, that's how we're really going to help people, and, it helps us out, too, by, getting people to come forward with their experiences. Yeah. We have more information to go on. We can refine our theories and get a little bit closer to what's happening. And, I'm honestly glad that you're out there, because I think that the field, in particular, a lot of the paranormal, but in particular the UFO and abduction field, we need more people out there like you that are making, good, well-rounded, theories based on interviews and a lot of evidence, things that are actually tangible that people are saying, yes, I'm experiencing. But unfortunately, even this is kind of a commentary on the field in general, but, for every person like you, or hopefully myself, or Jeffrey that's out there, there's 10 people out there saying crap like, oh yeah, Obama was on Mars 30 years ago. I seen him. He took the Stargate. I mean, we're still fighting the stigma there. It's like, oh, you're in UFOs, so we automatically get lumped in with that crap. And, good information and people like us is going to change that, I hope.
There's just so much out there, and I just think that when people feel comfortable to be able to share and not be isolated, that they're able to reach with their humanity, reconnect part of them, that taps them into the power of divine presence. And divine presence gives us confidence, it gives us harmony, it gives us awareness, it gives us compassion. So I think speaking about it is really important. We need each other to be able to hear each other's stories, because if we have to remain isolated and keep things secrets, it actually prevents the healing process, and it disconnects us from our soul in some ways. If we're unhealed and feel isolated and feel unloved and you have to keep all these secrets, it actually disempowers us. So I think, reducing the isolation and connecting and talking about it, giving each other support taps us into the divine power that we all have. Connect with that, and that gives us power to deal with whatever is arising in our experience. Can't compartmentalize this any longer. It hurts us to do that.
It does.
Yeah.
Actually, we got a question in the room from Glenn. He wants to know if you have any knowledge of a red light incident involving Oklahoma MUFON from about 10 or so years ago.
Well, I mean, I can't give names of people because that would, as a counselor, if someone says, please keep this confidential, I have to keep it confidential. So I can't give out names of people, but I've heard of people all over the country who've had these situations. So, and people involved in MUFON, as well as professionals and, even famous people. So, but I can't give out names because that would be, if I say I'm not going to say who they are, I have to keep my promise.
I understand, too. We take our confidentiality agreements at ICAR very seriously, and I mean, hey, nobody's going to talk to you if you go out and blab their story without permission in general, and, that's just plain wrong.
It happens to a lot of people, and it affects them deeply, and once we know these influences, it changes my view of reality. Let's put it that way. When I know how people can be affected and manipulated, and it be beyond their level of consciousness, then you just adopt a different view of reality.
Now, I've got kind of a question. All right, so you've got somebody that's been alien love bitten. I mean, once that happens to you, I mean, it's an intense thing. I mean, it's pretty much, a mind-blowing, amazing experience. Can you really go back to, a casual relationship with somebody who's not capable of sharing that kind of intense bond with you anymore? I mean, should you ever truly be satisfied by basically a one-sided relationship after that?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, unless, I know a gal, she's had a very powerful love bite before, but then she's in another relationship where it's even a better connection, so it's working. And sometimes I wonder if the love bite itself, it definitely affects you and wakes you up on a certain level of spiritual awareness, whether it's dark or light or anything in between. It wakes you up. But I think it opens up your ability to realize that you can have a deeper connection with someone that is much more powerful than what you've ever thought you could have. And so the quality to that you wish that you could have that kind of a connection with someone else, and that if you can't have that kind of connection, it makes everything pale by comparison. But I think that opens up your ability to connect energetically. If you heal the wounds, then you can connect on that level.
Let me put on the skeptic's hat for just a moment. All right, so let's say you've got two people that are having extraterrestrial contact. They've got their abduction, they've got their contact stories, and they meet another person of the opposite gender, whatever they're into, that happens to be in the same thing. I mean, couldn't it be possible that these people could sort of, in their minds, kind of create their own love bite? Because, let's be honest. The way I kind of look at it is, there's a paranormal experience is an important part of your life. If you can't have somebody compatible enough with you that has either experienced that themselves or is willing to at least accept that, you'll never be able to have a complete relationship with them.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it. Yeah.
Trust me, I know too. And, just based on that, so you've got two people with, compatible mindsets. They both claim that they've experienced same things. Is it possible that they could kind of make up a love bite in their own mind, sort of give into the daydream a little bit? Or just
I think
the daydream?
Love has to be real. You can't force love. And love has to happen and be there truly for both people. You could try to make it work, but whether or not you can really mimic what the aliens are doing, that's beyond my ability to assess. I don't really know. You could try, and deepening a connection with someone, there's always exercises you can do for heart opening and connecting with their energy field. There might be exercises and things you could do together to enhance the connection. But you can't just make love happen. Love just happens, That's my view. Love just happens. You feel it when you feel it, and when it's just not quite right, it ain't right.
Yeah, that's true. One of my corollaries has always been, if you have to wonder if it's love, then chances are it's probably not love. When it is, you'll know.
You just feel it. Yeah, you feel it.
And I just wanted to say that, I know this happens in relationships, but I think it also happens with politics. And I was jokingly going to say, ask you if the Republican Party was host to alien reptilian vampires from Pluto. That's just my joke. But I can see it happening on both sides of politics, on all sides of the fence, too. They're being influenced by things and forces and power.
Yeah. It's a mess.
That's a good one, Jeff. We're going to have to put the, political affiliation on our next big contactee survey we send out. Because I'd really like to know that.
There's forces, that influence people, and definitely people of power, be it Democratic or Republican. So,
you
have the shadow government and all that weird, the Illuminati stuff and all that. So,
I had a conversation with someone earlier in the week, and because we talked about politics, because we wondered, well, what really is the best choice of the lesser of evils, and this person, I will just say that he was in one of these secret projects. I won't say which one, but he seemed to think that in his opinion, that if Obama won, he felt like that administration may be more likely to carry out the false alien invasion scenario, which would actually stimulate the economy towards defense or defense-related issues. And then he felt that the Republican, he called them fascists, would be more likely to carry out an Agenda 21 scenario, which would be that, which would mean like complete economic destruction and global mayhem and just the worst kind of scenarios that you could imagine. And I was surprised to hear this from someone in the project because he was looking at the issues behind the issues with the aliens and the military, the secret government, and all that stuff, and taking into consideration what are the real issues that we deal with what side wins, what's more likely to. So I just thought that was interesting. I agree, but he seemed to think a fake alien invasion scenario would be more beneficial from an economic perspective and from a survival perspective for the human race.
Definitely. Well, that knows the end of the show here, so we close the curtain, and I'd love to go on, of course, about politics on this subject, or not. I don't know. That's a mixed subject for me right now. But I guess, where's the best place for everyone to pick up your book?
Oh, sure. Well, you could reach, you can go to keyholepublishing.com, Richard Dolan's site. That's my publisher. Or you can go directly on my website, evelorgan.com. And my book is on Amazon. It's Kindle and hard copy, and it's also available through Barnes & Noble or my publisher. So my website, my publisher's website, or you can go directly on Amazon.com also. And
all right,
we'll give you a full flavor of everything, yes. So
it's a great book, and I'm telling you, it's unique and definitely unlike any book you come across. It's definitely unique. Information contained therein, no doubt about it. So it's been a pleasure having you on the show, Eve, and good show with Jason, and we're going to end this bad puppy, and it's been a great time. Not a bad puppy, it's a good puppy. It's been a dark puppy and a light puppy. But thanks for doing the show, and we've enjoyed it, and thanks to Jason.
All righty, thank you. Good night.
It's been a pleasure being here.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
With psychic medium Christopher George. It's all about psychic readings. I welcome my listeners to call in for a free reading. Just remember, don't ask questions.
You're listening to Beth Williams Radio Network.
How's your lunch?
Good, Dad, but not as good as the sandwiches you used to make.
Really?
Sure. Remember how you'd melt the cheese first and dry the pickles on a paper towel so they didn't make the bread saggy? Oh, and then you'd cut it into 4 pieces with no crust?
I did all that.
Geez, Dad, how would anyone forget something like that?
You never know which moments will be the ones they'll remember forever, so take time to be a dad today. Learn more at 1-877-4DAD-411 or